This month is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. Khatt and I, a long time ago, she was like, I really want to start a podcast and we could be Scholar Baes. And I was like, yes, I latched onto it, Scholar Baes all day. And so our little Scholar Baes cohort is really ready to start this conversation on well, I've said love match conversations on love and other baggage as opposed to bullshit. Khatt, I don't know how you feel about that.
I like baggage. I like baggage. I mean, you know me. I love a good cuss word.
Me too.
Um, and I also think about, whether or not it would sound dismissive in some
Sure.
kind of way if we use bullshit. So I like baggage, right? Because it encompasses a much more diverse array of
Of
ends,
issues.
if you will.
Yeah.
There's the trash bag and the Prada bag, like,
I want to
and
do some,
everything in between.
yes, the trash bag and the Prada bag. Oh, I want to give props to Beverly Jenkins because the love match
Yes,
term
yes.
really emerges from her books. And Khatt was saying earlier this summer that I was super invested in historical romance novels, and I want to give a shout out to our third partner in this Scholar Bay conversation who's not here, but Dr. Ebony Utley. She shamed me this like summer, and I was like really immersed in historical romance novels. I loved Julie Garwood is one of my favorite historical romance novels. She writes about these Scottish lairds and these English brides who meet and fall in love across these cultural barriers in the 1100s, you know? So I was eating them up like cake. And so I was sharing that with her, and she was like, are these characters Black? And I was like, no, they're Scots. I don't even know if Black historical romance novels exist. So in my shame, I did some research and I fell in love with Beverly Jenkins. Everything she wrote, I tried to eat up, especially if it was written from the 1700s through the early 1900s, where you're talking about Black Reconstruction, you're talking about slavery, you're talking about freedom, the Freedom Bureau laws, you're talking about these characters who really embody this Black empowerment in this moment where we were constantly told that we were slaves, nobody revolted, happy Negroes, and here you have these
Yes.
Black men who are uplifting their families up. My
All
heart,
on the Underground Railroad.
oh,
Like,
on the Underground Railroad. So I read everything, and then I shared my love of this with Khatt, and she said in one of our text messages, I love how they call these like bonds between these Black men and Black women love matches. Like that's how you know that the spiritual, the cultural, the embodiment of that love that they felt was it. It was like that perfect soulmate fit, that soul cluster kind of, energy. And it came across on the page really nicely. So an ode to Beverly Jenkins and to our
shout
love
out Miss
match.
Jenkins.
Yes. I don't know. Love match comes in many different forms now. Some people say soulmates. We say soul clusters. We live in a polyamorous world now. So it might be more than one love match out there.
Which I think is true, but that's a whole other podcast, whole other conversation, right?
Yeah.
I absolutely think it's possible to be in love, like in love with more than one person. Yes, that we can go in on that, but I do. And so, yes, I like the idea of clusters, um, being soul clusters being, terminology that we use, quite frequently. So,
Absolutely.
yep.
So I was saying before, it's Domestic Violence Awareness Month. So we really wanted to kind of focus our conversation today as we take our initial jump into sharing these literary loves of these folks around issues of domestic violence, what types of domestic violence are out there, and also tap into the literary and the more imaginative examples that reflect our real reality. Sometimes it's really hard to share our very personal lived experiences of going through domestic violence. As if you're a survivor out there, I raise my hand as a survivor to say you don't always want to share those very traumatic moments. And so we turn to the literary as our source of representation, as examples for anyone who's out there listening to these conversations to say, here's what this might look like. And here's what the author really did well in terms of providing us with strategies to think about how to handle these situations. What would you do in these situations? So on and so forth. In our author of the day, is
Ooh,
Alexandria House.
a house.
Hashtag a house. We love her. Kat,
Awesome.
do her some
She's
justice.
awesome. Look, my sister is now even in the A house community. Uh,
Yes.
you start following her and everything because and that just speaks to the testimony, of how A house writes and how she gets after these very common dynamics, but she does it in such a nuanced way,
Yeah.
right? And there is a bit of, I think she beautifully captures this ability for it to be escapism, but it's
Yeah.
still grounded in a reality that just like tugs at all of your heartstrings. And she writes these people that are, they're real. They all have their own unapologetic authenticity. And shout out A house because you bring the big, beautiful Black women to the
Oh,
forefront of love matches, love making,
wait, and
all
not
of the
just
above.
that, but all the demographics. These women are not 16-year-old virgins who are
They
trying to
are
figure out how to, you have that
not.
representation out there and it matters, but these women are 35, have children and have lived through, some of them are widows and some of them have had, abortions. And there's so many real lived experiences that they carry in those years that you don't get from the 16-year-old versus the 35-year-old or the 40-year-old who's trying to refine her love match out there.
Yep.
So just a little bit of background on Alexandria House. She is more of a contemporary urban Black romance novelist. And so we were talking before about Beverly Jenkins, really capturing that historical. For me, Beverly Jenkins is it for that historical moment. She's my girl. I fangirl her all day long. But when it comes to that urban lit, the first person I'm turning to, whether on Audible mostly, is A House. And she's taking again those real life experiences. I mean, some of them is a little bit of fantasy, when you have big house, and then he's the Jay-Z of that worldview, but you get a
Yeah.
snapshot of what that particular class level might operate on, and the experiences that she puts on the page are things that you can still relate to, and empathize with along the way. As Khatt said, her character development is wonderful. Her context development is wonderful. I really appreciate how she brings these cultural crises that are not just individualized, but are also very much a part of the fabric of our society, be it
Yep.
domestic violence, be it school shootings and the aftermath of that, be it using kink to heal sexual damages and trauma,
Mental health issues, drug abuse,
and trying
you
to figure
know.
drug abuse, like, girl, we can go on and on. Those are just a couple of that come out, out there. So she is a perfect author to focus on, and I'm sure we'll come with a couple of the characters and a couple of the experiences from the novels that we hold fast into our heart. There's a couple of collections that are just to die for. You just got to read them all back to back so you know the whole worldview.
So good.
So I just want to define some terms for domestic violence so that we're all on the same page when it comes to, what are we talking about? We need to be armed with the definitions to know not only the concept, but also how that concept gets activated so that we can know and recognize and be conscious of this if it ever happens in our lives. Domestic violence, according to the National Domestic Violence Hotline, is a pattern of behaviors used by one person in relationship to gain power and control over another, often including physical, emotional, psychological, financial, or sexual abuse. I'll just let that sit for a moment. Whew. TV. It cuts across all demographics, all types of relationship practices, all sexual orientations, all genders. It is a universal issue across the board. Where do we want to jump in on this?
I don't know, just jump. Let's talk about the domestic part, right? So, in California, we typically refer to it as intimate partners.
Yes.
right? Yeah. So we can unpack a little bit what that is, right? The different categories, if you will, of
Yeah.
who qualifies as an intimate partner,
Yeah.
right? A lot of times we think it's just like our spouse, right? It's somebody that you have to actively be in a relationship with, and that's not necessarily true. It could
Yeah.
also be your former spouse, right? It could be, your kids, it can be your siblings, it could be, family members, somebody you once dated, you got kids with, um, or even, somebody that you live with that's not, but you're not married to,
Yes.
right?
Just to lay down the some of the shared definitions out there, the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC, they define intimate partner violence as violence or abuse that occurs between individuals in a close relationship, including spouses, partners, or dating relationships. So, absolutely, it's not just somebody that you would think, my boyfriend, my girlfriend, but it does cut across multiple different types of relationships.
Mhm.
That
And
intimate.
let me go back because I misspoke. I started thinking about victims in there, right? When you start getting into like your children, your
Yes,
family members, I got in there. I was like, wait a minute, something.
yes,
Yes, in terms of like the victim side, right? Who can be victims of domestic violence? It's not just people you're in romantic relationships with.
yes. And then, of course, they have their definitions that kind of really define those specific categories as well. So there's child witnessing domestic violence. So when a child is exposed to domestic violence within their household, either by witnessing the incident or being aware of the abuse, that can have severe and lasting impacts on a child's well-being. And this is so real and embodied. I remember a situation with the father of my children when right before we had our third child, we we were arguing over something. I think that the baby Anya was sick and I didn't want to take off of work. Like at that time he was driving for Uber. I was like, you could skip a shift. You'll be fine. You could pick it up later in the afternoon. I need to go to work. I've been calling off I don't know how long. And he in his anger flipped our dining room table over, and it was a glass table, so it shattered all over the townhouse. And for months that is all my daughter would talk about, right? She would remember that one time when daddy flipped the table and there was glass. I was picking up glass out of the townhouse for like months. And I remember finally having to turn to her and say, I do remember that, honey. And it's so unfortunate that that happened, but I don't think we should talk about that so much because that makes me feel really sad when we do. And having to realize that it impacted her so much that she kept bringing it up over and over, but also realizing that it impacted me in a different way, hearing my child talk about experiencing that and her very young 3, 4, 5-year-old self having to speak her own truth and acknowledge her own truth. And so, domestic violence has a broad range of who gets impacted. And these definitions can really help us to kind of specify who's getting included in the conversation so that we know who we're focusing on. Sometimes we're focusing on the victim or the survivor. Sometimes we're focusing on the perpetrator. Sometimes we're focusing on those who witnessed that and who experienced that, because everybody is it's happening to all of us at once, if you will.
Yeah, if I may offer too, when you talked about like the impact, right, of who gets affected, and I think a lot of times we really sort of dismiss children, right, who witness these things because we think they're young. We think that, oh, it's not anything happening to them, so it won't really have a lasting impact.
Yeah.
Well, I remember, being very, very young. I was under 3. I don't know quite how old I was, but I was under 3. And our neighbors were involved in domestic violence. And at that very young age, I made a pact with myself that I would not allow that to ever happen to me. Right. And whenever I share that with my mother and I share details about stuff I used to hear, she's always amazed because she was like, how do you even know that? You were too young. You shouldn't have been able to remember. And I'm like, Mom, that was very traumatic. Listening to that and seeing some of the things that I saw, it leaves a lasting impact. And that's one of the nefarious things about DV, right? Because even if it's just one experience, the implications, the long-term implications of that experience can be deep,
Yeah.
you know, and life altering. in a sense, because, what little baby girl makes a pact with themselves
Uh,
not to, have that as part of their lives. And it's something that I still very much, stick by. And that came off of being a witness to domestic violence with the neighbors.
we see this also in some of the work that A House offers up. I immediately think of Armaund Daniels and how he cuts across two or three of her books. Armaund
Mm.
Daniels, you see his story in he first starts off in Leland McLean's story, so it's a part of the McLean series. So Leland's book is Let Me Hold You, and we get introduced to Armaund Daniels as kind of a not a side character, but he's definitely not the main character, because Leland McLean falls in love with Kim, who is also Armaund Daniels' mother. So they are, spoiler alerts to anybody out there who's watching. It's going to be a good listen regardless, but we're about to spoil some stuff up in here.
Just a little taste, a little taste.
A little taste. So Leland and Armaund Daniels are on the same team. They have some beef that goes down. Leland ends up getting transferred, traded, if you will, over to the Cyclones, and come to find out he got a little crush on Miss Kim, and they get it on. And rightfully so, they fall in love. But Armaund Daniels, he grew up in a household where his mother, Kim, had been in a number of domestic violence situations. And as her son, a Black male in her household, he was constantly trying to protect her and also internalizing those cycles of violence that were happening in that environment. So in his act of protecting her, he often would hurt her in the same way that some of the perpetrators, would hurt her as well. Then you see in his book later on in the Cyclone series, where he has his own kind of confrontation of self, where he has to confront that long history of dealing with domestic violence in order to find love in his own life. We definitely see those cycles there. I don't know, Khatt, you read this series too. What are your thoughts?
This is one of those spaces where I just as a writer, I'm just like so in love with how she unfolds all of this particular trauma, right? So there's, we do know early on that Kim has had these experiences in her life.
Yeah.
And then on the peripheral side, we see this son who has this reputation, for being a hothead, for being violent and getting in trouble at work. But we see this mama bear who, even in spite of this deep, dark secret that she carries, like hunkers down to still try to protect him, right,
Mm-hmm.
at all costs. And I really love the way that A House unfolds that, because it comes like out as this reveal that the reason why she protects him so much is because she's also guarding this secret on how he exacts violence against her. But it's also, for me, it also shows how she is still caught up in this cycle of
Yeah.
violence herself, right? She still haven't healed through being this victim of domestic violence. And so the way that that gets laid out in the story is beautiful, because you start to look at Armaund and it's like, oh, I hate this kid. And I wish, I was like, I want Leland to just like boobop him real quick and like put him in his place. But she doesn't do that, right? She doesn't, sort of pit violence against violence. All that healing starts to come through these like acts of love, whether it's the way that Leland loves up on his mama, right? The way that she continues to try to love her son inside of that dysfunction.
Yeah.
Um, but then, the way that she heals with Leland sets up this scenario where she can start to heal with her son, and that he can start his own healing journey. Because
Yeah.
I look at these books and I'm like, man, if Kim and Leland would never have gotten together,
Yeah.
Armaund probably wouldn't have had his shot, right?
Yeah.
To really start to heal. And
Yeah.
so the way she layers that in, I just find it to be just absolutely
Yeah.
amazing.
She does a good job of putting the various types of abuse on display.
Mhm.
The financial abuse between, and it's so interesting because the abuse that's happening, yes, Kim had abuse with her previous partners, but really the abuse that really gets kind of under the microscope is the one between her and her son, even if the reveal doesn't come out until later. You see, as soon as he finds out that she is messing around with one of his former teammates, he fires her from her charity campaign that she is the director of. That's straight up financial abuse. He gaslights her in terms of like, what it is that she's feeling. He
Takes
like
her apartment.
he takes her apartment back. Like that's also fine. He displaces her. Who does that to their mama? Like, but he was so cold-hearted about it. There was emotional abuse with the way that he withheld his own energy towards her as a mother who longs for her son's approval, even though she knows she's had these displays of these negative experiences. She cares about what she looks like in her son's eyes. And then she has to she gets told that she's fired from her job by like an ex booty call friend. Like, how embarrassing is that? Like it's so abusive emotionally, spiritually, financially, and then physically as well.
Basically,
There were those
yeah.
displays of physicality, where even when he didn't mean it, he grabbed her and pushes her back. The fact that she spins and accidentally hits her head, like that is all a part of that cycle of violence as well.
And she
But
still protects him, right? When she's in the
I,
hospital, I won't say she was willing to let people think Leland did that to her, but she didn't do anything to really, you know,
but she was so afraid to tell Daniels anything. It didn't surprise me that she didn't speak up to blame him, for
yeah,
the things that he actually did. Like
yeah,
to me, as I was reading this book, I was thinking, who's mama? Like, who is the mama in this conversation? Like, I'm dating somebody new. It's none of your business. You're not in my bedroom. You don't even live in my house anymore. So you don't need to have any part of this conversation. But then once you understand, and this is something as single Black women who raise Black sons, we constantly are thinking about what role our Black male children are playing in our household. They have no place being our male partner in terms of the head of the household, running domestic issues as a romantic, intimate partner, the man of the household should be. That's my own opinion. But when my kid who's 9 turns up and he's like, I'm the man of the house. No, you're not. No, you're not. Like, as much as I appreciate where that sentiment comes from, I never want you to feel the pressure of you having to serve a
pressure,
role
yep,
that you never have in my life, period. Like
yep.
I'm good. And I think Armaund Daniels, he had played that role whether she wanted him to or not in so many different ways. He was like 13, almost 6 feet tall, having to hem Negroes up because they were putting hands on his mom. What do you expect in terms of him turning into that protector, no longer
Yeah.
a son, but having to be that protector of the household like that?
And I wonder if she missed that transition, like his transition into that role, because she was, not only immersed in her DV, but the guilt, right? Feeling very guilty that these things were happening in front of her son. And
Yeah.
so, a lot of times when we are being guided and ruled by guilt or by fear, we miss all of the things, right? We absolutely miss, the way in which now he has, for all intents and purposes, become your husband, right?
Yeah.
Or become your romantic partner. Well, I want to say romantic, but has become your
An
partner
intimate
in a
partner.
way that
It's
is
not
your intimate
necessarily
partner.
a romantic, but it is intimate in terms of their relationship.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then that just continued to happen because she also knows that, he has this, what we later learn is a condition, right? It's a diagnosable condition that he's developed because of that. And
Yeah.
again, that guilt, right? She has to protect him. I won't rock any boat. So I'm just going to let him do all of these things. And then as he rises, as he becomes financially independent and okay enough to take care of both of them, again, she just lets it happen. And I really wonder, what that is. Is it the guilt? of having him, have had these experiences throughout his life? Is it that she was just completely oblivious and unaware? As a single mother of a Black son, did she think she was doing the right thing by allowing him to, assume these, manly duties? Because, I think about what that line is for me a lot of times, because mine is almost 12 over here, always talking about, I'm the man, huh,
I'm the
mom?
man of the house. I'm a man.
So he don't do the man of the house, but he be like, I'm a man, I'm the man. Well, you're growing into a young man, honey, right?
I forget that.
Yes, but I am the only queen of the house, and
Yeah.
that is going to be it for, and I don't ever want to shut him down
Oh,
so that he doesn't learn how to lean into,
yeah.
his particular perception of what manhood will become for him. But I wonder if all of those things were at play for Kim. And that's kind of where, those moments where you just have to push pause or put the book down and you just sit and reflect. I did a lot of that with Kim because I was like, very much like you were like, who's the parent in this situation? But when you're so broken, when you're so disempowered,
Oh,
what lives there in terms of your relationship with your children? And so we see how, whatever her motivations were, we see how it manifested on the other side with Daniels, right? So I love that A House writes that in a way that allows us to really question, to really go in deep and really start thinking about some of these very nuanced
and
concerns.
to your earlier point about reading, Armand's contribution to Kim and Leland's story, she really does set us up for his narrative to have a central, a central storyline of its own. And what I appreciate about book, the first book versus moving into his own story, which is personal, and that's in the St. Louis Cyclone series, is that you don't hate Armand Daniels. You do see him as the troubled, like, Black male who grew up in this very traumatic kind of household environment, who definitely has issues that you may be turned off by. But at the same time, at least for me, I don't know how many brothers in my hood have been traumatized and hold that hurt in them for so long, where you sit in that pain with them and you empathize, even if you don't support the actions that they're taking. You're trying to figure out, like, how can you help somebody along that line? And that's one of the questions that individuals who go through DV or folks who are invested in this conversation have. Somebody who's a perpetrator of DV, can they change? Like, can they actually change their behaviors and learn how to strategically emotionally communicate what their needs are without having to be abusive, whether that's physically, verbally, financially, all those different kind of types of domestic violence that we were talking about. And I think when we get into personal, that's when you start to see the small actions on an everyday basis that were taken by Armand Daniels. That's why I came to love him at the end of his story. That's why I came to see his journey as somebody who was definitely practicing abusive and oppressive behaviors, both that harmed him and others, but that at some point he reached this own pinnacle in his own life where he's like, I can't really live like this anymore. My job is on the line. I'm forced to go to therapy, but since I have to go to this therapy, what's good? Let's figure out how to make this actually do something for me that can actually cause some change. Did he go to therapy, willingly? Nah, he dragged his feet, just like any other brother out there might drag his feet when he has to confront himself. But it set him up to where another brother talking to brother, which is a powerful kind of dynamic when you're talking about healing, Black masculinity, healing Black masculinity. All he did was drop him a 3-word diagnosis in an email. He didn't even say you were diagnosed. He just put the terms in the email and was like, here it is. And Armand Daniels was Googling and trying to figure out what that meant. Is he talking about me? This feels like me. I do this. Do I do this? And all this self-reflecting starts happening. And of course, he meets Big South's daughter, who just changes his life in a whole new therapeutic, intimate kind of way.
Which I love. She is, man, A House is such a beast because it's not my world. And
Mm-hmm.
maybe this is common practice in that world where people turn to BDSM, right, as a therapy, a therapeutic method. But I just thought that was so genius of her that this was the way to really allow Armaund to heal. Like, I mean, in addition to the love, because I think it set him up to be in a position to where he really could um experience and accept authentic love and love that did not seek to hurt while simultaneously hurting, right? That pleasurable
Pain.
side, of pain. And I just thought that was awesome. And what a great way for um readers to be exposed to a different avenue of healing. And you're right. He wouldn't have, when you asked the question earlier, like, can a person change? And I was sitting here like, I think they can if they commit to,
Yes.
if they are willing to, and then commit to actually doing the work. Absolutely. I think that, that change is possible. Most people don't know how to do the work. And
Yeah.
then some people are just not willing to do the work that's required because I don't know if they always see the benefit for themselves because,
Yeah.
we're talking about DV, it's perceived as outward, right? Because you're exacting this violence on someone else, not realizing that it really is all about you, right?
Mm.
It's about your hurt, your pain, your inability to control your emotions, whatever has happened to you that made you feel like you need to be in control or whatever that might be. DV always starts with the individual. And I'm not sure people are always aware of that for
I just want
themselves.
to share another definition here for those of us who are not familiar with BDSM, because often my friends tell me that I'm the prude of the group, Republican Rach, who doesn't like. And oh, Kat, I figured this out. Republican Rach is really from the 1800s, right? Because that just fits, right? I figured that out. She's totally in the Beverly Jenkins era. But back to defining these terms, BDSM is a term that describes sex that involves dominance, submission, and control. It's a practice that typically involves one partner taking on a more dominant role during sex while the other is more submissive. What I really, 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 really appreciate about introducing BDSM and kink in this novel specifically is that it was done by contract. Consent is everything. And when it comes to sexuality, if there's one thing in my own social justice outreach practices, it's having the power to say yes and knowing that you are giving consent when it comes to inviting somebody into your body, into your spirit, into that space, whether or not it's just, quote unquote, or if it's like really trying to connect with that love match with someone, that consent matters. Like that single act is so, so important. And the fact that Eller popped up with a contract that literally was pages long for Armaund Daniels to take a look at and say, okay, wait a minute. I'm supposed to research what this actually is. I'm going to be the sub. The sub is responsible for this. The dom is responsible for this. Like I had never really I have required my students in interpersonal communication to create their own consent contracts. But this was to a whole nother extent that I thought was just beautifully done. I'm going to use it as examples the next time I teach my interpersonal communication classes. Sometimes you're outside of the norm, and that's okay. Make sure that you're on the same page by sliding that contract across the table and getting that A-OK before you go there.
You know what I love too about A House and the way that she deals with consent, is that it normalizes what I think as a society we push back against, right?
Yeah.
So, in the aftermath of the age of Me Too, a lot of these conversations are always centered around women,
Yes.
right? That this is, it's women's issue when it comes to consent, right? but it's not, right? It starts with you over there, Mr. Man, that you are the one initiating that, that not necessarily initiating the conversation, but you will guide that
Yeah.
conversation with asking for permission, right? Making sure it's okay, checking in with the woman that you're trying to enter
Mm-hmm.
into. And the way that she does it, oh
So
my God, my God. It is so amazing because it's not abnormal.
no,
These men are like, can I kiss you? Can I touch you?
I kiss you
Right now we're
everywhere.
pitching and touching. Do you want this? Are you sure?
And they do
If
it
at
in
any
a
time
language
you don't
that
want it, let me know. It's good. If it becomes too much, we can stop. Like, I love
love
that
it.
because it helps to normalize, and it
Yes.
also sort of like debunks. And it's one of the things I dislike in the conversations around consent, right? When we start basically dehumanizing men and saying that they can't control themselves, and
Come
after
on.
it starts, they can't stop. Well, you
They're not
absolutely can,
animals.
right?
Right.
And so
Right.
the way that she humanizes it, um and places that responsibility in the hands of men,
Yes.
oh my
Yes.
goodness,
Yes,
it's
a hundred
beautiful.
percent, all the way,
It's
and
beautiful.
it cuts across whether or not it cuts across all the relationship stages, whether it's in the initiation stage and they're trying to
Yes.
get down, whether it's in the middle of the bay stage where they're like so
It's
deep in love, they're still
intensifying. Oh
asking for
yes.
consent, whether they've been together for it. I love that because one of the misconceptions about DV is that if you're in a married situation that you don't have to ask for sexual consent.
Hello.
And
Hello.
that's not the truth. Like my body is my body always, and you should be asking for consent to touch me across all board. You should be going for the yes. You should be asking for it. And A House across her books like does such a beautiful job not only with like the asking for consent in terms of the sex part, but also like the protecting the safety part of condom or no condom, like are you on birth control, like like do you plan on taking the plan B, like
I know
it's so
you're on the IUD. I
cool.
feel it.
Oh,
Right? Like, okay, so quick, let's historical, right? Beverly Jenkins
oh,
is
what's
dealing
that
with
sea
consent
moss,
way
what's
back
that
then. Girl,
sea moss when
wait a
she
minute. What does Sable call Raymond's punishment? Wait, oh my God. Basically when he wants to go down on her. Remember there was oh my gosh, what is
they
it? What
have
did
to
she
apologize, he has to apologize.
Yes, right?
Yes,
The apology,
yes,
right? Do you
his
want me to
apology is that act
apologize?
down there, very subtly put together.
And I look, I love it. I absolutely love it, because again, this idea, we like to think that consent is a relatively new concept, and it is not.
No.
Right. And I think that, and I'm guilty of it too, because I had to think about why was I like tripping reading Beverly Jenkins stuff as I watch man after man, ask for permission. And I'm like, oh, I don't know if that's realistic. Oh, I don't know.
No,
Right?
it's so
But
realistic. Yeah.
because it's so removed from my modern sensibilities and my own experiences,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
After it was like, we gonna do this, there was nothing else that looked like consent throughout. Even when there was moments where I'm like, I don't know if I really want to go through with it, but I've
Yes.
started already, so I can't stop it,
But that's the
right?
thing about consent, right? At any point during the sexual interaction, it's important for us to know that we can always withdraw consent. And that's
Yes.
important for any partner. So you could be comfortable with kissing. You could be comfortable with somebody touching your breast and touching your butt. You might not be comfortable with them putting their hand between your legs. And it's okay for you to say, I'm uncomfortable with that. But
Yep.
that's also why it's important for you to ask for consent along the way. And there are beautiful ways that it can be done. For me, I've said this before to you, Kat. Drayveon Walker in that St. Louis Cyclone series, I think his book is technical. He is the best at every step of the way asking for consent. Can I kiss you? Can I kiss you everywhere? Can I fuck you? And it's like, oh my God, like, yes, yes, and yes. Like, it's so beautifully done. And it's so subtle. It shows this act of care to say, I'm never going to move faster than where you're going to want me to move at, you know?
It's
Um,
normal.
it's so normal. And I think in my interpersonal communication classes, I've had a couple students in the past who have kind of complained that we actually have to talk about consent because they're uncomfortable with those conversations. You should never be uncomfortable about protecting your body. It's yours. And I think that if I'm okay with the student who drops to say I'm uncomfortable with those conversations, and if they blame me for that, but I'm uncomfortable with saying I'm not going to talk about this conversation because one or two students are still uncomfortable in their own sexuality and their own sexual practices that others can't gain from these type of strategies that we're trying to teach them. Because Khatt, across the 20 years that we've been working with all of these doc ed, doc X, students from, early 2000 to the 20 teens, goodness gracious, 2010, 2012, up until now, we have seen and witnessed the type of relationships that they have developed. Some of them are married, some of them are in polyamorous relationships, some of them are in same-sex relationships, some of them are and they're doing the damn thing.
Across the spectrum. Yeah.
Across the spectrum. And so we need to become comfortable in having those conversations, and consent is one of those things, and asking people to protect themselves and letting them know how I love when people are trading their STD test results, where it's like, well, I already slid you my test results. I just, text you. So if we're ready to go without condoms, here's how it could go down.
Well, I just finished reading, listening to Drayveon's story. I went back to it. I was like, okay, fine. Let me go back. I think Drayveon is in my top 5.
He is, or he isn't?
He is.
Okay.
I adore him.
I do too. I love him so much.
Very there's a childlike quality to him, not the trauma part, but just the way that he loves. That is just so beautiful. And when she was like, when he came home and, she was like, oh, here's my test results. Right. And then she was like, you already showed me yours, but here are mine, I'm all clean. And so then, right, that next level of consent in an established relationship. So now we cannot use condoms.
Let me just for the third time.
Oh,
yes. And Drayveon is another character. And so is, his partner in that book. What's her name?
I was about to call her Sable because now I'm back in Beverly's. It's Drayveon and the Blue-Eyed Bandit. Oh my God.
Hold on, I'm gonna pull it
up. And I just finished listening to it last night.
I've read so many of these, I get all their characters, mixed up. Stevie October.
Thank you.
Stevie October has her own very repressive, household of growing up that has its own level of emotional abuse, financial abuse, parental abuse. But Drayveon, you're absolutely right about his boyish energy. He's so wonderfully playful and gentle, even in all of his strength. When you find out later on, kind of like his crises that he is at the core of him, that gets peeled back by loving Stevie, and also having to confront his family, who are basically
was just about to say, let's talk about that family.
I was like, that family who, saw this young man go through so much trauma. His story starts in DV. His trauma starts in DV. His mother is, schizophrenic. His father, had to get pulled up off of him. In fact, it's so unfortunate, spoiler alert here, but guns in the household increase the likelihood that somebody could die. And you see this happening in his story. He actually shoots somebody, and has to carry that with him his whole life, and it's not until he for me, Black men who carry trauma like that really suffer with opening themselves up in intimate relationships. They're not trusting of like whether or not somebody can accept all these flaws in them. And so it's really, really wonderful the way Alexandria House shows kind of that struggle that this particular Black man had, and then how Stevie also is there for him, like, and he's there for her.
Like
I'm not gonna lie,
they're for each other in different ways, right? So like
different ways.
he absolutely loves her, but you know, his love language definitely is giving like
Oh my God,
uh
it's so overboard.
he's a giver, right?
He's gifting gifts. His love
Oh,
language is giving gifts.
oh, and
Overwhelmingly.
he he does it in a way that doesn't it never feels controlling. It never feels like, in contrast, right? So let's go to Neil, right?
Okay.
One of the McLean brothers. And this is one of the things that drives me crazy about Neil.
Yes.
Neil had his moments of generosity, his moments of being a protector, um, you know, his strong love, but it always felt controlling to me. It always felt manipulating to me. He bought her things so that he can keep track of her. He gave her, you know, like he, you know, stormed into her places of work
That's
in
so
the
interesting.
name of, I'm concerned about you know, possibly ruining her bag, right? By doing that because he's concerned and he loves her, not caring about the implications of what he did. And when she raises that as a concern, he basically like, you ain't got to work. I got money. And it's like, whoa.
I think we hit two sides of the coin there, you know, because in Drayveon Walker, my question was going to be, are these relationship red flags? Like, let's start with like his love language is definitely gift giving. From day one, when he walks into, you know, the hospital with just basic gifts, like, girl, you just had a baby in my, you know, on my front porch, so I'm gonna go ahead and, you know, bring you some balloons and a teddy bear. Then he came in with the car
Big
seat,
old car seat.
right? Then he came in with the car because her car literally didn't start, you know, and like it's not like she didn't need it. And it's not like he was like pressed. Like he really did try to let her leave with her car. The car just was like dead. Old girl's her job is basically delivering, you know, food to others. So she can't even work, you know, and she just had a baby. So he just gifts her with this, you know, SUV. It's not like it's a Mercedes,
Needing
it's
to
not like
feel
it's an
it.
Audi or a Range Rover. It's like a basic Toyota Highlander or whatever, but it's still an SUV, which is like she struggles. Should I accept this? Should I not
Mhm.
accept this? What does this mean to accept this? Then he comes over. She has inherited baby clothes from around the way from, you know, sister friends who have like went ahead and gifted her with some baby clothes. So, you know, this unnamed baby that she has, because she left the hospital with like not having a name for her baby, is wearing little girl clothes. He don't know no better, so she doesn't really care. Everything's all good. Drayveon comes in there, he's all booed up with the baby. Next thing you know, she got like a million clothes
Like
in her.
so much so she had to move because there was no room,
He had to
right?
get her a skyrise apartment. So, I mean, are those relationship red flags in terms of setting herself up for financial, you know, situations where she still doesn't have control of her finances, where somebody else is providing for her? Like those could be relationship red flags, but in Drayvion's story, it didn't read like that to me. Whereas in
Yeah.
Neil's story, it definitely read like that for me, where it was like all the things that you said before with Neil, I probably would have been backtracking. Like, I'm not sure if this Negro is for me or not. But with Drayvon, it felt so much like he just wanted to feel needed, and she needed somebody and nobody was there to help her. She didn't like hoe herself out. She wasn't trying to like ask for anything. He literally was like, this is the way that I share love. I would do this for anybody else. You have this specific need. I'm going to set you up. Don't buy me a house. How about an apartment? 2 bedrooms, 2 baths.
Turned out it was 3 bedrooms. But then what was that conversation? Remember, she was like, but I can't afford this. And he was like, don't worry about it. I've paid for it until you can return and do it
He said
yourself.
he said that he would take care of the financials until she was on her feet. And then it
and to
was so
show
funny because he's
yourself.
holding the baby and she's like turned to him because the realtor left so they could have a conversation. She's like, I can't afford this. I told you this and I can't do that. And then I got to furnish all this. My hand-me-down furniture won't even like fill this place up. And he looks at the baby and he's like, yo, mama crazy. She think I ain't gonna buy her no furniture. And I was like, I'm melting over here. Like he's
All
like,
up
I
on the
got
couch.
you. And look, 3 grand is like not anything shabby in terms of you an everyday person who's trying to make rent. 3 grand is a lot of money, right?
She live
But
in California.
imagine.
That's like par of the
So
course.
St. Louis. So you know what kind of apartment there or skyrise apartment that they have in St. Louis that they drop in 3 bills on that every month. But he's the superstar basketball player. He's like, this ain't a drop in the bucket. Like it's all good. He could probably write it off
Yes,
if he wanted.
and it's no different than what he was doing for his family, right? Although somebody was like, yo, you didn't even give your auntie an apartment this
But the
nice.
jealousy.
Well, again, it goes back to the abuse, right? That was, for me, that was just like lashing out because they felt control slipping.
Yeah.
They're used to not Leland, they're used to Drayveon's money and resources being for them, right? So remember towards the end when they all had the little intervention
Yeah.
and set them down and they all, just kind of like ran down, how they have suffered
Yeah.
because Drayveon has, made other choices. I was sitting there like, y'all ungrateful as
That's so
hell right
ungrateful.
now.
I was like,
And this
everybody
is
need to be
really
slapped up in
about
here, especially
y'all, right?
grandma.
This is about y'all and not necessarily about him. Not one time did any of them ask him like what his needs were or how can they support or acknowledge, I
Oh,
see your life is changing in a way you want it to. How can we still make this work? Instead, they was like, nah, this bitch trying to get you. Nah, oops,
no,
edit
you
that
can
out.
totally,
But
you don't have to edit anything out. We're going to keep this
um,
cut and dry. But Neff was like, I'll tell your girlfriend about your crackhead murdering self. And I was like, if you don't beat her ass, like straight up,
but wait a
just
minute.
mollywop her real quick.
Wait a minute, because Stevie was like, I stood up because I'm just as tall as her. And was like, I
She's
said,
like,
come
match
on,
energy, match
come on.
energy. Don't think for one moment I'm gonna let you beat my ass up in here. Say one more thing. And then at the end of the book, when she was like, so Drayveon don't hit women, but I do. Like,
I do.
but
Yes.
game recognized game. Game recognized game. Because Neff turned around and she was like, I like that energy, but don't get it twisted. It's like, okay.
She was like, duly noted. When you want to, whenever you want to thump, let me know. I
Whenever
was
you
like, oh. I mean, and even that speaks to the way that A House empowers her characters
reach.
at every step of the way, right? Even in their lowest moments, their weakest moments, they
They
still
still
have
have
the ability
agency.
to tap into that power. And I'm just like, oh my God, like she's amazing. Like low key, I study her craft a little bit here over here. I've been looking at her writing from a technical perspective, and I'm getting ready to have to like buy the books because I need to like put my
I just
hands on.
downloaded some to Kindle. I was like, wait a minute, what would this read like on a page? What about the text on the page? Listen, I've told you this a million and one times, but narrators matter. And I love the narrators that A House chooses on her books. Like I'm not a fan of a lot of folks, but specifically Jacoby DM and Wesley Shaman, they can narrate anything and I will listen to it. As a matter of fact, they have been my lead on some of the books that I've downloaded because I specifically looked for those voices. I feel like for me, what it is with the narrator is it's two things. It's tone and pacing. Like the tone of the narrator, the tone of how they actually like lay everything out is super important because that's the mood. And I'm on Audible, so I have to listen to that mood and really be drawn in it in order to hook my attention. But then it's also the pacing. like the thing that disturbed me, I'm in the ethics series. You turned me onto the ethics series, so now I'm in this gangsta black criminal
Shout
reality, which
out
is
to Ashley Antoinette. Yeah.
out out. She is killing me. She's killing me with these endings. But anyway,
Ending, girl, because you're gonna come back for the next book. Do you
I'll
hear?
be immediately hitting the button like ethic 4. Let's go. Right. So
I'm
she
Ethic 4, Rach.
ethic 4. I told you I am beast mode, and I finished ethic 3 in the middle of last night. I started ethic 4 this morning. I can't get
Well,
enough of
y'all,
it.
she just
Butterflies on deck.
started reading this books like 2 days ago.
I mean, I told you I'm a little addicted. I'm addicted. Yeah.
But your Obi, JD, Mr. JD, and Wesley are narrating on this one
I
as
think we're
well.
married. He's been in my ear for like 5 months now, y'all. Like he
With
put
that
a ring
voice,
on it. Let's go.
with that voice.
With that,
Um,
that deep cadence. Dear Lord,
girl, girl.
girl.
Um, yeah, I mean, she just A House has written some exquisite characters, male and female.
Yeah.
Um, and everybody got juicy pussies and big dicks that they know what to do with. But
Apparently
wait a
so.
minute. Wait a minute. Can we talk about Stevie and her throat spray?
Wait, can we talk about that period? I was like on my walk the other day and I was just thinking, am I really a prude? Is throat numbing spray like a thing or something? Because
Yeah, I'm a
this
prude
was
too.
the
I've
first
never
time
heard
that
of
I had
that,
heard of throat numbing spray. I thought I was pretty well versed. I don't know.
but I sure did make a little mental bookmark. Like,
I was
let
I, and can I want to say a couple of things about we're gonna get on the kinky side of things for a moment, and just there's a part of me that kind of blushes and giggles like a little schoolgirl when I'm like, she makes sucking dick and that money shot sound like money, like the woman asked for it, not just like this man just squirted all over it, but she's accepting it, she's receiving it, she's encouraging it, she's embraced. And that, to me, that's not how oral sex had really been presented, like especially junior high school. It was like, good girls don't suck dick. And then it's like, as you grow into your own practice, you start to realize what you like and what you don't like. But I love how these women embrace all the different kind of possibilities
the
of being a
empowerment.
woman.
It's
It's
the
that
empowerment.
empowerment.
She empowers them every step of the
And
way, even when they have traumas that make them like a little hesitant. She still leaves room and space for them to open up into that moment and still like figure out how to give themselves fully to
yes,
this person that they are trusting. And I love that she allows it to happen with a man who reciprocates,
yes,
right, that trust. So not to re-traumatize them over
yes.
again, but
And
like,
who asked for
you know,
permission? Well, you want it, baby.
asking for permission and like check. I forget who, because at this point, everybody just be fucking all the time. But somebody was having sex at one point, and even while they were in it, like he was acknowledging that, like, he knew it was painful for her. He knew that there was some trauma there. And as he was like fucking stroking her soul out of her, he still was checking in. Are you okay? Do you want me to stop? And she's like, no. He was like, does it hurt? She's like, yes. Do you want me to stop? No, and I'm just like, oh my, that's some
That's
good
it.
shit.
That's some really, really beautiful and amazing communication in
Mm,
those moments.
mm. And that's where, and the other day we were when we were texting back and forth about the kind of sex we wanted, and I was like, that unselfish sex,
That
like it's
desperation sex.
all of the above, right? Because right now it's really, that sensibility is really heightened right now, and like A House has like helped me unlock my imagination about what that unselfishness looks like, or
Yeah.
what it can look like, not only for my partner but for me,
Mm.
right?
Mm.
Because of my especially those early sexual experiences, like I had to teach myself like how to orgasm quickly, because I was finding myself in
Yeah.
those earlier experiences being with somebody who didn't know how to be with me. It was just their act of, oh, this is sex and no, right?
And not paying
I
attention to
was
the
like,
partner. Yes.
not paying attention to the partner. So I had to teach myself, I know that if I do this, that, and the third, I'm going to get off irregardless to whatever the hell they got going on.
Mm,
Right.
mm.
But what that did was set up this control mechanism in me that manifests itself in my lovemaking sometimes. And so, like, that ability to just surrender, right? Without feeling like I'm disempowered.
Mm.
Like, that is so live in my imagination now. Like, wow, this is what that could look like.
I
I
think
could absolutely rely or allow myself to like rely on this other person to bring me pleasure,
100%.
right? I don't have to make that happen,
And you
you
give
know,
your permission because you know that they're going to take care of you. You
because
know,
they're gonna take care of you.
yeah.
And also I'm like,
Wait a minute,
this
all these
probably
men be
too.
trying to literally make these girls come like 3 times before they actually get their nut. And I'm not saying that that's like not a thing, but I'm like, damn, all of y'all all the time? Like every
I
time?
had
Like where are y'all
I had
hiding?
well, there was this time in college.
In our 20s? Are those days long gone now because of
There was this time in college where I messed with someone he was so egotistical that he had to make sure
Mm,
that I was taken care of before he did. I was very aware that it wasn't really about my pleasure. It was about I think he got off on the fact that he could get me off,
sure.
right?
But
I benefited from that greatly.
yes, I was like, even in that selfishness, there's a little bit of a benefit for the receiver.
Right? I benefited from that greatly, but I think that those people are out there. But you know what I've been saying to myself lately, as of late? Stop fucking casually, Kat.
Mm,
Right? The thing that separates these people, these love matches versus my own experiences, is that I have not been attached. Like I haven't really been emotionally attached and or invested in my sexual partners of the last, you know, 12, 13 years.
right.
It's just been, oh, I like you, but that's different, right? That's different. And so it the sex is different. And so when we look at these characters, they have they're operating inside of their destiny,
Mm,
right? And their destiny with each other. And so therefore there is a level of openness that I think that they are experiencing that allows them to have these like my pussy gonna stay wet for you for these 45 minutes we fucking,
there's
or every time you say come over here. Speaking of come, Wade has
yeah,
Ethic the
I
tele
think yes, girl, yeah.
um
And she does.
okay,
Mm.
even though she'd be like, oh, I hate you, I hate
I mean, like their story is so intense. Like, I mean, that's a conversation for another time, for same
because listen
conversations
to
that we're
that
having here
Ethic.
today, but just a different representation,
Yes,
a different world.
yes,
Man,
yes.
it's
But
you, these books definitely have us rethinking type of partnerships that we want to have. And I think you're absolutely right. I have absolutely been closed-minded to even investing in anybody else until recently, where it's like, wait a minute, like I'm still a fully functioning grown ass woman with some needs around here, and I need to stop neglecting that part of my life. And I'm so grateful for Beverly Jenkins because I think that I fell into her boundless, literature, her boundless like fantasies of, black romance and, black love, because I needed to heal and connect with these representations of black men that had been missing in my own life. Like you when I am blessed to have today, right after our conversation in a little while, Kat, like we're going to have dinner with the parents who are celebrating their 47th or 48th wedding anniversary. They've known each other since, middle school. And it's I never thought that this is where I would be in my life. I'm not saying that I'm in a bad place. It's just different from the kind of vision that I had constructed for myself. I know the type of relationships that I always thought that I would try to manifest and have for my family and for me. And I'm grateful to have been introduced to my sexuality through, real men who really did love on me and who taught me the value of myself. But also, I mean, the shit's been traumatic. And so you close down and you have to do your own self healing for a little while as you figure out what's next. And Beverly Jenkins and A House helped me to see that I could be open, but this digital dating world is so fucking foul these days. It's just like, y'all Negroes need to read some of these A House novels so I can roll up over here and you can treat somebody with some respect.
So speaking of which, and I was like, okay, Trina, let's just ride this out first. I want some men to read these novels, or I want to engage with
But
some
are they
men who
true?
are reading these
Are they good
novels.
representation? Do they actually identify in the same ways? Are these the behaviors that you would engage with? Because inquiring minds want to know. I think that A House pretty much gets a very good, represent. I mean, and they're so different. Like all of these beautiful representations of Black men are so different, and they each have their own different issues that they're traumatizing from being sexually assaulted at 13, and having a baby out of that situation to experiencing domestic violence where your mother and your father are putting hands on each other to mental health, issues where you're bipolar. Like there's so many different kind of the shit that these brothers go through. I'm curious because I know in my own life, part of the reason I think I shut down so much is because going through these various different stages of domestic violence. No, I didn't experience the physical part of it, but I experienced the financial part of it. I experienced the emotional part of it. I experienced the verbal part of it. All that other stuff that's underneath there was definitely a part of my life for a specific moment. And like these books are healing practices because I can see other
Yeah.
representations happening. I say I've been there in this moment in my own life, you know, and I don't know if other men, Black men out there specifically, would actually identify with those representations, embrace those representations if they'd alter them. I don't know. Brothers, tell us. What do you think? Are you reading A House?
I know that would be great if you all can identify yourselves and then
Yeah.
come on over with us and have a little conversation. I would love that if that could be a possibility because um
Or who are some of these brother docs or brother, writers that I need to be reading or we need to be reading
I
because
was just thinking about that. I was just
yeah,
thinking about oh wow, I don't really the males that I read are so not in the romance world, unless you
Eric
count
Jerome
urban
McGee
lit,
or
but that's not even the focus. The romantic part is not even the focus.
good stuff.
It's all the other stuff. But no, I would love to, and I would love to have these, sort of like roundtable conversations with a group of men that, would be willing and that would be willing to go in deep and be vulnerable enough to talk about the hard stuff, right?
Let's get it on deck.
Well, let's put that on our mission. That's going to be a part of our mission as we unfold these out.
We close out our conversation here. I love this question. I think it's a fun one. Not a fun one, but like a fun one. Look, some of these situations with these characters, and even in our real lives, sometimes you got to get up and get out kind of quick. And you need to have a backup plan, whether that's a stash of some money somewhere that you can pick up, an extra hidden bank account, a bag of clothes. What's the getaway bag look like? What is going in your emergency getaway bag? And one of the questions that I have in our prevention manuals, the question is, what are 3 things that are going into your emergency getaway kit? What do you think? What's going in there? What's going in your emergency bag, Khatt?
Of mine. So it's the basic. They're the basic stuff, right? There's definitely some underwear in there. There's like 2 or 3 changes of clothing for myself. There is cash on hand. There is also a printout of like I keep a document that has like all of my passwords, all of that.
Yeah.
That's in there. There's a list of emergency contacts in case the phone is not,
Yeah.
available. But also there's a burner phone that's in there that's on
I was
deck.
thinking that. Yeah.
And then there is a debit card or a credit card of something that is completely disconnected from whatever it is that my partner knows
Mhm.
about, since we're also in this like non-cash world. So
Yeah.
definitely there would be a side
Yeah.
um institutional way for me to be able to have credit and or cash, right?
Yeah.
So that would be in my go bag as well. Uh, yeah, I don't know. I think I think that's the bulk of it as I think about it,
Do you hit,
just
I think you hit
sort
the
of
ones
like
that
in the
are
moment.
really important. I'm 100% making sure I got some access to some type of money in some way, shape, or form. Definitely cash and a card, an empty credit card or an extra credit card, that is not attached to anyone else in the household or nobody else has access to, because financial abuse is real. Some folks will go in and cut all the money off and then you don't have access to any of that. Um, I think that it goes without saying that the emergency bag is going to have extra clothing and things that I can wear, and if I need to, the other one for me is, in addition to the what I call the call tree, so who's on your emergency call tree is another one of the questions that we ask in our teen version of the DV manual. Who are we going to call in emergencies in this digital age? Maybe my cell phone dies and I don't have anybody's phone number. And that's unfortunate that I'm not in the 90s anymore where everybody's number is memorized. And the only number I have memorized now is my mama's. But keeping a call tree list of who are the emergency contacts, including some of the services that you might need, on hand would be really good. Um, and then I'm keeping my ID, like my passport, my driver's license, birth certificate, those types of contact informations that really social security card. Those things are things that you
At the very least, a copy, right? Because, depending on the situation, you might not have access
yeah,
to those private ones, especially when we start talking about what is it called? Is it called like domestic abuse, where it's sort of like indentured servitude, in a sense, where immigrants might come over and part of their working conditions is that they have to surrender their passport and their
yeah,
identification to
yeah.
their
And
employers. Like,
that's
what?
totally abusive. Yeah, that's completely abusive.
So
Yeah.
even copies, and I think the copies would at least help gain access to some of the resources, especially when people are aware of why you only have the copies, right? And I think that would be very helpful as well. So at the very least, copies of those critical documents would help, if not the actual document.
And then another thing that I think is really important is just identifying who your top three folks are who support you, and
Mhm.
then when I say the top three people that you support, of course, those individuals you can immediately turn to, but sometimes in these domestic situations, um, they already know who you're going to go to. And so, like, for instance, in our family, somebody had a situation, but they didn't want to come to the main house because they knew that that person was going to show up to the main house. So they had to figure out where they could go that was a little bit inconspicuous. So who are your emergency contacts that might not be like that person that you would immediately think of? And A House's latest book that just came out, Holding, this is a situation where, I'm sorry, it's not Holding. In Polo's story, in the St. Louis cyclone
Well,
story, in Polo's story, when Kendra wanted to get away, she had a friend who had a cabin out in the middle of nowhere, and that's where she went. And that had some other circumstances and stuff. You want to make sure that that friend doesn't have, any kind of manipulating type of like factors in there, like they're not sexually attracted to you, so you end up someplace where you just put one abusive situation into another situation. But having a friend that who may have an extra place for you to stay that's not on the radar or on the map where you can go is definitely something to think about. Like, and I'm telling you, I'm a woman with a PhD. I never thought I would have to think about some of these things that I have gone through. Never thought that I would go through some of the situations with my someone I loved so much, but the shit happens. So thinking ahead about how to prevent yourself from being in a situation where you really are without, whether it be support or finances or a solution, can really just help you to stay ahead of the game.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Agreed. I was sitting here like, oh my God, like who are my people? And then I was like, well, if it was local, I was like, wow, oh,
I know. And you don't always want
my
somebody all
partner
over.
would definitely be around my family, but there's only one individual that comes to mind who is a colleague, now friend that I'm not sure I would mix companies with a partner.
Yes.
That and I know that they would also be more than welcoming, right,
Yes.
to me and my child to be like, okay, come over here, real quick. But damn, that is something really deep
It's
to think.
and you don't always want somebody in your business. So, think for me when I think about like if I'm in a situation and where I'm at, I do have colleagues who I feel like I have very close relationships with, but don't necessarily know anything about my intimate partnership relationships or that part of me. However, if I were to call them up and say, I need some place to be, they would welcome me, because, they would, with no questions asked, they would welcome me and say, whatever you need, I will help you in this situation. So I know there those individuals, but also just thinking about your circle. I don't have a church home. I'm not a religious person, but maybe you have a church home and maybe you have folks in the church who could be somebody who could be dependable. Maybe you're on an organized team and you have somebody on your team that you can reach out to. Maybe you are a part of a community, a group, community, social group or whatnot. Finding somebody who isn't necessarily all up in your business, but gives you good enough vibes to say in an emergency, they would probably say yes if I needed some help in a pinch. Be creative, like, and then sometimes it doesn't have to be personal. Sometimes it's knowing the services in your area, knowing who the
Yeah.
Title IX officer is on your campus could be useful, knowing who the counselors are on your campus. We are all what do you call it, Khatt, where we are responsible for reporting issues of domestic violence and issues of sexual assault, mandated reporters.
A great resource for California, that would be beneficial for those dealing with DV. There's the California Partnership to End
Yeah.
Domestic Violence. And, that website has a wealth of information that is available for people who need them. And it's really cool. You can look by region up and down California. They've broken it down into regions, and you click that region, and then there's a whole other list of places that you can peruse. And so, I know sometimes when you're in the throes of it, you don't have time to sit down and research, right?
No.
And so, that's where you can call the National Domestic Violence Hotline, that which is let me go over to it really quick. I think it's like safe or something. 1-800 1-800-799-SAFE. That, if you need that immediate assistance, go ahead. But if you're out there, you're experiencing issues with domestic violence, and you're thinking you're coming to your breaking point, you
Yeah.
know get bold enough to take a little bit of time. Go to the California Partnership to End Domestic Violence, which is cpedv.org. You can open it up in the private browsing mode, so that if you're concerned about your partner finding it, open it up in a private browsing mode, and go ahead and take a look at some of those resources. And like Rach was just saying, you have a list of resources on hand that you can put in your go bag, that at any moment you can call those resources and reach out to them. So
And I think
that's a
I'll
great
close out
resource.
on this one personal kind of narrative. First of all, I'm from a very female centered family. And one of the most beautiful kind of memories that I have of like some advice that my auntie gave, my other auntie, my great aunt gave her daughter. she said when she got married, just put a little bit of money away in the Bible.
Don't let
You know,
your right hand know what your
yeah,
left hand
yeah,
doing.
exactly. Just put a little money away every time. Like, don't. There should be no secrets between partners, but at the same time, like you should have your own and not feel selfish about that, right? And so tuck a little bit away just for a rainy day, just for emergency situation. And we crack up in our family because it was a couple years later, and my auntie turned to her mom and was like, what should I do with this $8,000 in the Bible?
Oh boy.
It starts to add up, but make sure you're taking care of yourself. We hope that this conversation on love match, conversations on love and other baggage, really help to kind of shed light on domestic violence, highlight some of those definitions, share with you some of those various red flags in the relationships that we might see, and turns you on to a few of our favorite authors that we have recommended and the books that they have out there. Hands down, you can't go wrong with Beverly Jenkins or A House. We'll definitely be back with more conversations later on. Y'all let us know what you want to talk about because there's so much jam packed in these books that we could talk about all the things. And that's really what we're here doing, talking shop about all the things on Scholar Baes.
Yes, thank you all for tuning in. And like Rach just said, we will be back talking about all things love with baggage, whether it's a trash bag or a Prada bag, baby. We gonna get into it. So,
Not the trap bag, though.
huh?
Not the trap bag.
Trap bag, baby, the trap bag. So yes, so thank you all so much. Rach, this has been awesome. And
Absolutely.
we'll see you soon.